Ever get that feeling you pour your heart into a project, something you really want to last, but it just sort of fizzles, like a souffle that falls flat? Today we're serving up a deep dive into building things that last, using this awesome framework from a guy named Lakeman.
What's interesting is how Lakeman immediately throws down a challenge. Are you a top-down or a bottom-up builder? And he's not just talking about skyscrapers. He applies this to everything, businesses, relationships, even learning a new skill.
Right, and when I was prepping for this, I have to admit, Lakeman's writing kind of cracked me up. It's not your typical dry, boring stuff. He's got this super energetic, almost playful tone, like he's just itching to share a secret.
Absolutely. He's like that friend who bursts into the room with the guys, they have to hear this. And the energy is contagious, makes you actually want to dig into these ideas.
Okay, so let's start with top-down. I feel like most of us have at least heard this term, right? But Lakeman takes it to a whole other level. He's all about what he calls the Requirements Definition Document, or as he puts it, the RDD. Sounds kind of intimidating, but bear with me.
Don't let the jargon scare you off. It's actually pretty straightforward. Imagine you're setting out on a road trip. You wouldn't just jump in the car and start driving aimlessly, would you? You'd first decide on your destination, right? That's your RDD, your crystal clear vision of what you want to achieve.
So it's like before you even think about booking hotels or packing snacks, you need to know where you're going. No more of that figure it out as you go approach, which, let's be honest, sometimes leads to more detours than destinations.
Precisely. It's about being intentional strategic. Lakeman argues that this clear vision, your RDD, is crucial because it informs every other decision you make along the way.
Which makes total sense. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you nowhere. But once you have that clear destination in mind, what's next in this top-down roadmap?
That's where the design definition document comes in the DDD. Again, sounds technical, but think of it as your detailed itinerary. You've got your destination, now you're mapping out the route, planning your stops, estimating the time and resources you'll need.
Okay, so it's like time to break out the maps and plan your fuel stops, maybe even scout out some cool roadside attractions along the way.
Exactly. And just like on a road trip, you've got to factor in potential detours or roadblocks. Lakeman uses this really interesting analogy of the bathtub curve, which is often used to represent the lifespan of products.
Bathtub curve. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Picture a bathtub right, but tipped on its side. That steep drop at the beginning, that represents the higher chance of things going wrong early on in a project, those initial hiccups and hurdles.
Makes sense. You're still figuring things out, ironing out the kinks. Like hitting construction on the highway right as you leave town.
Exactly. Then you have that nice, long, flat bottom of the tub. That's where things are running smoothly, your project is stable, you're hitting your stride.
Cruising along, enjoying the scenery, maybe belting out some tunes with the windows down.
You got it. But then, just like any good road trip has to end, you reach that upward curve at the far end of the bathtub. That represents the inevitable wear and tear that comes with time, the increased chance of things breaking down or needing maintenance.
So you're saying that by using this top-down approach with the RDD and DDD, it's like we're planning our route with the full awareness that there might be potholes and traffic jams along the way, so we're better prepared to handle them.
Exactly. It's about building for the long haul, anticipating challenges, and having a plan to address them, rather than just hoping for smooth sailing the entire way.
So instead of being that car sputtering on the side of the road with a flat tire and no spare, we're prepared for pretty much anything. I like those odds a lot better.
Yeah.
But Lakeman doesn't just talk about this top-down approach, right? There's this whole other bottom-up idea that he dives into.
Right. And this is where things get really interesting. Imagine instead of meticulously planning your road trip, you just hop in the car and start driving. Maybe you've got a vague idea of where you want to go, but you're mostly just following your instincts, taking detours on a whim, seeing what you stumble across.
Okay, that sounds kind of freeing, I have to admit. A little less pressure maybe. Like I'm a sucker for a good roadside diner, even if it wasn't on the original itinerary.
Exactly. And Lakeman acknowledges that there's a certain charm to that spontaneity, that willingness to embrace the unknown. He calls this the bottom-up approach, and it's often driven by necessity, especially when resources are limited or you need to move quickly.
It's like that classic entrepreneurial spirit, starting with a shoestring budget and a whole lot of hustle, right?
Yeah.
Just figuring it out as you go, making do with what you have.
Exactly. And in those early stages, it can be really effective. You're not bogged down by over-planning. You're adaptable. You're reacting to challenges in real time.
So where does this bottom-up approach tend to fall short? Because I have a feeling there's a reason why most people plan their road trips, even if they leave room for spontaneity.
Right. And Lakeman highlights a few key limitations. For starters, when you're so focused on the immediate, on just putting one foot in front of the other, you can lose sight of the bigger picture. Remember the RDD, that clear destination we talked about?
Yeah, that whole knowing where you're going thing.
Right. With a purely bottom-up approach, you risk building something amazing, but it might not actually lead you where you ultimately want to go.
It's like you build this incredible car capable of off-roading and handling any terrain, but you realize you've been driving in circles this whole time because you never stopped to look at a map.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about the lack of direction. Because bottom-up is so reactive, it can also be incredibly vulnerable to changes in the landscape. What happens when you hit a roadblock that you didn't anticipate and your quick fix solution no longer cuts it?
It's like that saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Oof. That hits a little too close to home sometimes. But I'm sensing there's a plot twist coming. Lakeman doesn't just leave us stranded on the side of the road with a faulty GPS, does he?
Definitely not. He actually offers a really elegant solution, which is to integrate the two approaches. He calls it using bottom-up feedback to refine your top-down plan.
Okay, so back to our road trip analogy. It's like having that well-planned route, but also being open to taking a detour if we hear about an amazing hidden gem along the way.
Precisely. You're not rigidly sticking to the plan no matter what. You're staying open to new information, to unexpected opportunities, and even to those happy accidents that can sometimes lead to the most incredible discoveries.
I love that, because sometimes the best adventures are the unplanned ones.
Yeah.
But we still get the reassurance of knowing we've got that map to guide us back on track if we need it. So how do we actually make this integration thing work in real life? Because it's easy to say be strategic and adaptable, but how do we find that balance without getting overwhelmed?
It's all about building in those feedback loops, those moments where you pause, reflect, and adjust your course based on what you're learning along the way.
So like those regular pit stops on a road trip where you can stretch your legs, grab a snack, and consult the map to make sure you're still heading in the right direction.
Exactly. And this applies to anything you're trying to build that lasts. Starting a business. Test your ideas early and often get feedback from your target market and be willing to pivot based on what you learn.
And it doesn't have to be some big formal thing, right?
Yeah.
Even just asking a friend for their honest opinion on that draft you've been working on that's incorporating bottom-up feedback.
Absolutely. It's about staying connected to the real world, to the people you're trying to reach, and being willing to adapt your approach based on their needs and feedback.
This is making me rethink how I approach, well, pretty much everything. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from Lakeman's work?
That building something that lasts is a journey, not a destination. It requires both a clear vision and the flexibility to adapt along the way.
And sometimes the most scenic route isn't always the most direct one. Who knew we'd learn so much from a metaphorical road trip today? But seriously, this framework is pure gold. A huge thank you to Guy Lakeman for giving us the ultimate blueprint for building things that stand the test of time.
And a huge thank you to you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey of discovery.
If you're feeling inspired to apply some top-down thinking to your own life, and let's be real, who isn't, head over to our website. We've got a ton of resources, including a breakdown of Lakeman's framework and some thought-provoking questions to get you started. And don't forget to share your own experiences with us. We might even feature your insights in a future episode. Until next time, keep exploring, keep building, and most importantly, keep that top-down vision aligned with your bottom-up hustle.